At my birthday dinner, my father stood up and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. He said that we all agreed I should sell my house and give the money to my sister's baby fund because she needed it more. Some of my cousins cheered, my mother smiled, and my sister wiped away what looked like forced tears. I simply raised my glass, unlocked my phone, and read aloud a message from the bank that caused every fork at the table to pause. I'm 32, and I never imagined my birthday would turn into the moment everything shifted. The dinner took place at a decent restaurant downtown. It wasn't overly expensive, but it was nicer than my usual choice. I had selected the venue myself and covered the bill for everyone, as I typically did. My parents were there, along with my younger sister, several cousins, a few aunts and uncles, around 20 people in total. I had worked hard to reach where I was and wanted to celebrate with family. Looking back, that may have been my first mistake. The evening began normally. People were eating, drinking, and making small talk. My sister sat across from me with her husband, frequently placing her hand on her stomach in a noticeable way, as if to remind everyone she was expecting. She was 4 months pregnant. My mother kept looking at her with a proud, affectionate expression I knew very well. It was the same look she had shown throughout my life. Whenever my sister achieved anything, no matter how minor, I often felt like I faded into the background. My sister had always been treated as the favorite. Her straight A's were celebrated like major achievements, while my consistent B's were met with advice to improve. Her college graduation involved a large gathering of over 100 guests, while mine was a simple dinner at a chain restaurant. When she got engaged, my parents hosted an event that cost more than my entire wedding 2 years ago, an event they did not contribute to at all. I had stopped comparing long ago, or at least I tried to convince myself I had. When the food arrived, everyone started eating. I was midway through my meal when my father stood up. He wasn't particularly tall, but he knew how to command attention. He tapped his glass with a fork, and the table grew quiet. I assumed he was about to give a toast, perhaps say something kind for once. That assumption didn't last long. He cleared his throat, looked directly at me, and spoke clearly enough for nearby tables to hear. He explained that everyone present had come to an agreement. According to him, they had discussed the situation and believed I should sell my house and give the proceeds to my sister for her baby fund, since she needed it more. The statement caught me completely off guard. I sat still, my fork suspended in midair, trying to understand what I had just heard. My house, the 3-bedroom bungalow I had saved for over the years, the place I had personally renovated, spending weekends painting and restoring, was the first real property I had ever owned, and now I was being told to sell it and hand over the money. The table reacted immediately. One of my cousins began clapping and cheering as if an announcement had just been made for everyone's benefit. An aunt nodded in agreement, commenting on how families should support one another. My uncle raised his glass. My mother, seated beside my father, looked at me with an expectant smile, as though waiting for my approval. My sister dabbed at her eyes with what seemed like rehearsed emotion, something I had seen her do years ago when she wanted sympathy. Her husband sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, watching me with a mix of expectation and entitlement that was difficult to ignore. For a moment, I struggled to respond. The restaurant suddenly felt overwhelming, too warm, too noisy. I could see people talking, but I couldn't fully process their words. I caught fragments about medical expenses, the cost of raising a child, and how I was now single after my divorce and didn't require a large house. Someone mentioned my income, suggesting I was in a position to help. What stood out most was that no one had asked me directly. No one had discussed this with me beforehand. Instead, they had collectively decided what should happen with my finances, my property, and my life. And they chose my birthday dinner, an event I was hosting and paying for, to present this decision. I placed my fork down carefully. My hands were unsteady, but I kept my composure. I took a sip of water, then another. Everyone at the table was watching me, waiting for my reaction. My sister had a subtle smile, as if she had already assumed the outcome. What they didn't realize was that I had been paying closer attention over the past few months. Dad sat back down, clearly satisfied. Mom continued smiling, and my sister leaned forward slightly. I told them I had received an important email from the bank earlier that morning, and then I began reading it aloud. The message confirmed that the final payment on my house had been completed. It stated that I was now the full owner of the property, entirely mortgage-free, with an estimated value of around $450,000 in the current market. Utensil hit plates. One of my cousins dropped his glass. Someone gasped, but I continued. My voice carried across the now quiet table. The email also referred to another issue that had been under review. The bank informed me that the loan application submitted by my sister and her husband had been denied after fraudulent details were identified. Specifically, they had listed me as a co-signer and guarantor on a $300,000 loan without my knowledge or permission. My sister's expression changed immediately. Her husband avoided eye contact, staring down at his plate. My mother's smile faded into something strained. I continued speaking. I explained that I had become suspicious 2 months earlier when my credit score dropped without explanation. After investigating, I found that someone had been using my personal information. There had been multiple applications in my name, credit cards, personal loans, even a car lease, all linked with my sister's address as a secondary contact. The table was completely silent now. A phone rang somewhere nearby, but no one moved to answer it. I explained that 3 weeks earlier I had filed a police report, hired a lawyer, and contacted credit bureaus and banks. Every fraudulent attempt had been traced back to my sister and her husband. The evidence was clear. According to my lawyer, it was one of the most straightforward identity theft cases he had handled. My father tried to speak, but no words came out. He looked at my mother, then at my sister. This time, my sister was crying genuinely, not in the controlled way from earlier. Her husband attempted to help her stand, saying something about leaving, but I told him to sit down. My tone remained calm but firm enough that he stopped. I continued by clarifying that their financial situation was not due to medical expenses or upcoming child care costs. They had accumulated over $90,000 in debt through poor investments and gambling. My brother-in-law had been involved in sports betting and cryptocurrency ventures. They had lost significant amounts, maxed out their credit, and were facing eviction. One of my aunts began crying. My uncle looked at my sister with visible disbelief. My cousins remained silent. I explained that when they could no longer secure loans legally, they chose to misuse my identity. They applied for credit lines, loans, and even attempted to place a second mortgage on my home using forged documents. That attempt failed because I had already placed fraud alerts on my property after earlier incidents. My mother finally spoke, asking how I could accuse my own sister. Her voice was tense and emotional. She said my sister was pregnant and that I was putting her future at risk. I asked her directly if she had known. She didn't respond, but her reaction was enough. She had known, perhaps not every detail, but enough. From my father's silence, it was clear he had some awareness as well. This entire situation, the dinner, the request, had been an attempt to resolve their problem by pressuring me into selling my house and giving the money willingly. I explained that I would not agree to that. I informed them that the police were already involved. My lawyer had issued formal notices, and all credit agencies had been alerted. I was pursuing full legal action for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. The estimated financial damage was around $120,000, including legal costs, disputed interest, and the impact on my credit. My sister began crying, saying they had been desperate and intended to repay everything. Her husband remained silent. I responded that desperation does not justify using someone else's identity. I asked what would have happened if I had not discovered it. If those loans had defaulted, I would have been held responsible. My property could have been at risk, my credit severely damaged, and my future affected. My father then shifted his approach, saying I was acting selfishly and that families should support one another. He mentioned times they had helped me in the past, money I had borrowed as a teenager, and the period after college when I stayed with them for 6 months. I reminded him that I had repaid every amount in full, including interest. I also pointed out that I had paid rent during those 6 months, even though it was often overlooked. I had records of every transaction, which I showed on my phone. At that point, the table became divided. My aunt and uncle began arguing. My cousins whispered among themselves.
One of them suggested forgiveness and moving forward. I asked him if he would forgive someone who had taken $100,000 from him.
The district attorney began reviewing the case. My sister and her husband secured legal representation, and their lawyer contacted mine with a proposed settlement. They offered to repay the stolen amount in monthly installments if I agreed to drop the criminal charges. I declined. 3 days ago, my mother came to my house. I chose not to open the door. She remained outside for about 40 minutes, alternating between shouting and crying, insisting that I was ruining my sister's life. She claimed the stress was affecting the pregnancy and said I would be responsible if anything happened to the baby. In response, I contacted the police and filed a trespassing complaint. The extended family has now taken sides. Most have supported my sister, as is often the case when someone refuses to go along with family pressure. However, a few individuals reached out privately. One cousin, who was not present at the dinner, told me she had experienced missing money years ago and had suspected my sister but lacked proof. My uncle, on my mother's side, sent a message expressing that he understood my position. Unexpectedly, I also heard from people outside the immediate family. Former classmates who learned about the situation, colleagues I had spoken to, and even my ex-wife, whom I hadn't contacted since the divorce, reached out. She mentioned that she had always felt my family treated me unfairly and supported my decision to stand firm. Work has become a stable environment. My supervisor is aware of the situation in general terms and has been accommodating when I need to take calls from my lawyer. My colleagues have shown quiet support, small gestures like bringing coffee or checking in without being intrusive. At home, the atmosphere has changed. It feels quieter, but also more manageable. I have started making changes, redecorating and adjusting things I previously left unchanged due to past relationships or expectations of family visits. For the first time, the space feels entirely my own. Yesterday, my sister's lawyer contacted mine again. Their situation appears to be worsening. The criminal charges are moving forward, and the consequences are more serious than they anticipated. The forgery charges alone carry significant penalties, and combined with identity theft, the case is substantial. My brother-in-law may face prison time. Part of me does feel some level of conflict. It's a response shaped over years of being expected to prioritize family and maintain peace. That instinct suggests I should reconsider, perhaps show leniency. However, I also remember the events at the restaurant, being publicly told to give up my home without discussion, the approval from others at the table, and the long-standing pattern of being overlooked. I have decided not to reverse my position. 1 month has passed since the dinner. Developments have progressed more quickly than I expected. Charges have been formally filed. My sister and her husband were arrested last week and later released on bail, which my parents secured by taking a loan against their own house. I learned this through my uncle, who has been keeping me informed. The criminal trial is scheduled in 3 months, while the civil case is proceeding separately. My lawyer has now filed for damages totaling $160,000, an increase after discovering additional fraudulent accounts they had opened. My parents attempted another approach. They asked a longtime family acquaintance to speak with me. He contacted me and suggested meeting for coffee, which I agreed to out of curiosity. During the conversation, he encouraged me to reconsider, stating that my sister had made mistakes but did not deserve such severe consequences. He repeatedly referenced the pregnancy and said I would be responsible if anything happened to the baby. In asking him if he had ever experienced identity theft, he said he had not. Then I asked him if he would be willing to absorb a $100,000 loss under similar circumstances. He had no response. I also asked when my parents had approached him about speaking to me. He admitted it was 2 days after my birthday, before I had contacted authorities or fully understood the situation. It became clear that the dinner had not been spontaneous. It had been planned in advance, with the intention of pressuring me into compliance. I ended the meeting after that. Within the extended family, the situation has escalated. There have been reported arguments at gatherings I am no longer invited to.
Some relatives are questioning whether my sister may have attempted similar actions with them. One cousin informed me that several family members have reviewed their credit reports